everyone. This is Pennie with Brave and Unbroken Project, and we are wrapping up Child Abuse Prevention Month, and really going to be focused on trauma and healing the rest of the year. And so today we have with us, so gracious of you to spend some time with us, Tamera Pihl with Desta-Phoenix, and going to introduce her new organization and what her efforts are and her background. So Tamera, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, Pennie.
Yeah, could you tell us a little bit about Desta-Phoenix and who you are? And we'll start there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Desta-Phoenix is coaching and advocacy. And really what we're doing is about living free. It's overcoming the trauma that you might have experienced sometime in your life, finding strength in your voice, and also finding joy and happiness. That's the final goal for everyone, right? So, and then a lot of people ask about the name Desta-Phoenix, and really the reason why I came up with that is Desta means joy and happiness, and Phoenix is the bird rising above. It's overcoming trauma. It's all about the journey, and that's exactly what I'm all about.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited about your organization and your development of this organization and watching it unfold. And your content is increasing and just some amazing things you're doing and working through. So why don't you give our listeners a little background on you and how did you get to Desta-Phoenix?
Well, honestly, I feel like my life has prepared me for this moment. And I feel like this has been a calling for me for a long time. It just takes some of us a little bit longer to get to their calling than others, doesn't it, Pennie? And so really, I've experienced trauma from childhood. I have such a weird, twisted, bizarre story that when I was 18, or 18, 19, somewhere around there, I got involved with a counselor that knew my aunt. So she counseled me on her lunch break for $10 an hour, sweet person. And she called my aunt and just said, "Is she lying to me?" My aunt's like, "No, if she's telling you the story, it's probably true." So really, and stop me if you want to ask questions, Pennie, but I'll kind of start from my childhood. I lived in a pretty volatile house. My dad was abusive in a lot of ways. He had the most huge loving heart at the same time. It's very sometimes confusing. When I was very young, he was in law enforcement. He was a chief of police of a small town. And my mom worked as an armed security guard at Hanford. Yet, um, there is that volatile situation there. Um, I was kind of, my trauma around that was not that I suffered a lot of physical abuse from him. It was more, I was put on a pedestal while I watched other people suffer the physical abuse from him. Or the animals. I was playing house with my cat and tried to put her into a drawer and she didn't like it. So, of course, she bit me. And, you know, uh, she was decapitated and after that. So, I mean, just things like that. So, we had, experience with the bullwhip. We had, that my brother, and you learn behavior, right? So I went to borrow an encyclopedia and my brother pulled a knife on me because that's normal child behavior. And he got with a bullwhip. So we've had things like that kind of all throughout my life that we battled with up until sixth grade. So that physical trauma, sixth grade, my mom wrote a note from my dad, put the ring on the note, and picked us kids up from school, and we disappeared. So that was, again, a traumatic thing because we love our father. We knew it was a good thing, but also, we disappeared from everything we knew. We were friends. We didn't tell them where we were. I mean, it was just you pick up and not know anything and drive away in a car and don't return. So Um, so that's a lot of, you can imagine from there. So 0 to 6 years old. In that time too, I think you just learn you don't know appropriate. You don't know appropriate on a lot of different levels. And so when you have friends and my brother and I had a lot of friends that had a brother and sister combination too, and we met them through church or different organizations or whatever. And um so when the friends want to come over and play house and I'm always mom, and moms and dads do things, right? So it was always that from a very young age. I can't even remember. All I know, it was maybe first or second grade was the first time I was a mom in the situation. And so that's the first time that I really remember being explored and fondled and, you know, kissed and, all of that stuff. Um, and I think that's just sets up your life. So that's the start of the story. I don't know how much you want me to continue without you talking, Penny.
No, you did good. You did good. I think that's a great intro because I think you got a great example and statement about what's normal, right? What's normal, what are boundaries? If you're not taught that at a young age, we don't know what those are. And we try to figure it out and kind of do that journey on our own. So how did that trauma set you up for what was to come? And then share what came.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess I'll kind of split it up. I'll I'll first tell you, just kind of a little bit about where we lived and how we moved around and stuff, and then how maybe the sexual abuse kind of fell into that when I can. But so we disappeared for a couple weeks, and we were only gone for a couple weeks, and we had some friends that I'm going to say friends that my mom and dad knew, but they lived on a commune, and the commune was outside of Walla Walla. And so when we came back after we disappeared for a couple weeks, we moved on to that commune, and of course, they protected us against my dad. What they were saying. So that commune, it was located outside of Walla Walla. It was in the country, and Walla Walla. I mean, this was back in the 80s, right? So Walla Walla wasn't what it is now. Um, and the commune you could access two ways. So you could access it by, crossing over a couple creeks on logs and so forth from the main road, or it did have about 7 miles out of town. It had a road, and that it was a dead end road off the main street, and then off that dead end road you could get to a long driveway that you can drive past for that. But you had the wheat field and you had the gardens in between, so you could see anybody that was trying to access that space. There was two Dobermans that they had. One was posted to a tree out by the creek entrance, and one was posted out by the field entrance. So, it was pretty private, and you didn't have a lot of visitors that you didn't know were going to come, and if you did, then you still knew. So that commune was led by someone we called Trainer. So Trainer was the head guy out there. He had a wife named Dee. And so those were the two that ran everything. There was a couple small families out there with very young kids that were there. There was a couple single people. There was one 16-year-old kid. Everybody had, obviously issues. So at the commune, there's no running water. So we did have a little trickle that we could do that was rigged up from the creek. So, but no paid for running water. We had no electricity. We had lights that were hooked up to battery. There was a little wood box out there with a big barrel on top that had, that the sun would heat up for the men to take showers, and then the women took sponge baths. And that's just how it was. So that was kind of a unique experience, a unique story.
Mm.
There was obviously an outhouse since we didn't have running water. And then there is one building per se that we called the cook shack. And so the cook shack is where most of the D and trainers slept in the cook shack. And so did the single people for the most part. The two small families slept in like a small trailer, like camping trailer. Um, my younger brother and I slept in tent when we lived out there. And then my older brother slept with the 16-year-old in like a pickup camper kind of situation. But the situation out there was pretty much trainer could sleep with anybody he wanted to. There was a lot of sharing out there. Um, my mom fell in love with one of the guys out there, and he became my sister's father. Um, but after we'd been out there, really just for the summer, it was towards the end of the summer that we moved. My dad found out we were out there, and he threatened to bring the cops out there. So then we flew from there to California. And so my brothers and my mom and I fled to California, lived there for 1/4 of school. And then when I had some family in California that we were living near, and when they started finding out a little bit of pieces of the information that was going on, pressing my mom a little bit more, we decided to move again. So in 7th grade, I went to 3 different schools. I moved 4 times.
Mm.
So it was, just really unsteady a little bit. Throughout all of this, I will back up a little bit. So I talked about not knowing, really boundaries. So I have to back up. So before we disappeared, my first boyfriend was at 9 years old and he was 13. It was from my dad's church, because after law enforcement, my dad became a pastor, and we owned a church for a while. And it was a small church, but there was, I don't know, I would guess probably 30 to 50 people there. So it was small, but enough. So one of the boys, took a liking to me. His dad was in prison. But so he was my first boyfriend. And my mom at that time, saw us doing some stuff, and she's like, maybe you're not old enough for that yet, is all she said to me. And I'm like, okay. And again, I'm naive enough to say, okay. My mom said no,
Yeah, right.
right. Um, but then, so fast forward after that, my mom moved us back to Wadesburg, which is just outside of Walla Walla, and my grandmother lived there now. In Wadesburg, we didn't stay there for too awful long because situations progressed, and I have a sister and brother who's 10 and 12 years older than me, and then I have siblings near my age and a sister that's much younger than me. And so I ended up calling my sister and saying, okay, my mom wants to move us back to the flats. Like, I can't do that. Can we live with you? And mind you, my sister's now maybe 21, 22. She has a child of her own. And she's like,
Yeah,
oh my God.
right.
And so we ended up, my aunt and uncle took us in from there. One of my mom's aunts and uncles, the estate got involved. Police were called. We were taken away from my mom. And that's kind of the story from there. I do remember, I think, yeah, I have a great relationship with my mom now, but when someone's a victim, all they know is the victim life.
Yeah.
And at that time, I've forgiven her since then, but it's traumatic as a kid. She was told at one point when we had the first supervised visitation with her, because that's all we were allowed with her. She just said she just didn't want anybody to control her at all. So when they told her, you know, you can have your kids back, but you can't see her boyfriend or you can't go back to the flats, she goes, no one's going to control me ever again. And if that means not having my kids, that means not having my kids. So that was a decision made there from her. That was, you know,
Yeah.
she's mentioned since then that she remembers it a different way. But you know, that's pretty much verbatim my memory. So that was hard. But I think, and this is where I like Desta-Phoenix coming in. I always, like when I was living at the flats, I always had my escape plan. I could always see the light. I always had people like feeding me, like I would get fed information like, okay, your other aunt wants you to come live with her. This, I mean, all these little pieces of light and information and people coming through and saving me little bits at a time was amazing to me. And that's what got me through every step is that fight and just searching for that light constantly. Even if you couldn't control anything right there, you had a light.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for
So
that, Tamera. Such a journey to get where you are now. And I think you're right. I think you've been set up for this moment. Now, I'm not a fan of things happen for a reason, and written great blogs
right.
on that.
Yeah.
But I do think when we can take our experiences and our trauma and not allow ourselves to be in that victim mode, we can then, and not allow those things to define us,
Right.
then we can help make a difference for our families, and we can change cycles, and we can then help other people. And I think that's exactly where you're at with Desta-Phoenix.
It's a kind of a nice freeing moment when you can just tell. I mean, obviously, there's so many pieces to the story, but when you can
Absolutely.
tell your story and just get it out there and where you are and not have that shame behind it, because really, you never did anything. I never did anything. Yet there's shame. Like, why would there be shame? And that's what I mean about living free with Desta-Phoenix. Like, get away from that shame. That's
Right.
freeing. Live free.
Absolutely. And yeah, shame grows in silence. We know that. And I mean, it's a proven fact in child abuse recovery and healing, and all aspects of life. We know that. We were just talking about kind leadership and how there's even shame involved in leadership stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely right. So with Brave and Unbroken Project, we're doing the Be Loud campaign, and that's love yourself, own your story, unleash your voice, and dare to be loud. And I just absolutely love, you've unleashed your voice. You're talking about your story more than I think I've ever heard you talk about it. We've only touched on tiny pieces over the years, many, many years,
Yes.
23 years. Um,
More.
yeah, there you go. 24. And so, I mean, I absolutely love that. But I think something else that I want to ask you about is the love yourself piece. Because I think when we are in shame, when we're in these situations as children, it is hard. And like you said, the little pieces of light were being thrown your way. I also think there's there's post-traumatic stress, but there's also post-traumatic growth, where we hold ourselves accountable to a different level of like excelling and succeeding. And so I just would love for you to touch on the love yourself piece and that post-traumatic growth, because I think it probably applies.
Well, I think it came in pieces, quite honestly. And again, I think that it is um, really finding, for me, it was finding those pieces of light, but then not only finding them, but accepting them. Because I think there are things that come into your life that people do want to help. Not everybody has it. I did. People wanted to help. They may not be the people you expected. They may not be the people that you want or should help, but they do. And
Mhm.
so you have to be willing to and have the courage to accept that help when it comes about. So I think, quite honestly, my first piece of loving myself was I was 13 years old. So I need to backtrack, because another piece of my sexual um, abuse story was another church friends. of my brother and I, and I was 11 and he was 16, but that's the first time that someone tried to fully have sex with me, and that's my body wouldn't allow it. So the church was a very confusing thing for me.
Yeah.
And I suffered a lot with that. And I suffered a lot with boundaries on both the sexual side, honestly, and the you know, how to be treated and how to live and treat people. Um, but at 13, I had been experimenting with drugs. They were all around me. Walla Walla was in probably still is infested with them. And so I had done, marijuana, speed several times, and even I honestly, I still don't know, but I believe it to be methamphetamine or cocaine at one point that was given to me by people I love and I still love even. But um so I was experimenting a lot and then drinking and partying. And at 13 I decided, okay, this is not the life I want for me. I don't know what I want, but I know it's not this. So I quit um, all the drugs. I haven't touched drugs since then. Um, and so that was a big love myself moment, and it was a big aha moment. And I really just don't know, Penny, what was inside of me to say, I'm not going to do that anymore. It was just a choice I made at 13. And so fast forward, even though we were taken away from my mom and of course my dad, we ended up being put back in with my dad. Um, and then we were bounced around between the two of them behind the scenes. We were back
Mm.
and forth whenever someone didn't want something or wanted to work on something, we were bounced around. We ended up moving over to the west side of Washington. In 1989, and my mom was married to my stepdad from the flats, as what we called the commune. And they had had my younger sister at that time. Sorry, my papers are flying. They had my younger sister at that time, and we were living with them. And um, the story that, again, my dad's sister was another aunt that just kept feeding me since I was on the flats. Come live with me, come live with me. And I really didn't know her that well. Like, I seriously did not know her that well. When we moved over here, she had taken me on a trip and she tried to interact more, but still to move in with someone,
Yeah.
right? Um, so the police were called when I was 16 years old to the house. They were called more than that, but at 16 years old, they were called. And my stepdad was angry at me, calling me every name in the book, throwing things. Ended up, we locked him outside. So the police came, they found him. I had a cold sore, which I get. And the, I remember the officer's like, "Are you sure he didn't do anything to you?" And I said, "No, I would tell you he did all of this, but he didn't hit me." Right. And whatever the officer saw, he ended up coming to the arraignment hearing. And my mom and stepmom and my uh, dad and stepdad were all sitting together. And I went to the arraignment hearing because I wanted to make sure that I thought my voice would be heard. And so the police officer called me over to sit with him. And after the arraignment hearing, he actually took me outside and said, I've talked to my wife, and if you need a place to stay, you can stay with us. And he gave me a card with his phone number on it. I wish now I would have kept that officer's
Mm.
name and number. But I didn't at that time. But that was huge, right?
Yeah.
So I was dating a guy. I was 16, he was 22. Do you see the pattern with my my
Yeah.
decisions there? But that guy, I thought he had it all put together. He owned a house and he had a good job, and but what he did have for me is I went, of course, and checked in with him after the arraignment hearing, and he's like, "You're not going home." So I went home, left a note from my mom saying, "I'm not coming home. I'm moving in with Eric." and I got my stuff and I moved in with them. And thankfully, again, I don't know what the love myself moment was there and what brought me to it. I knew somehow deep down inside I didn't want to be with Eric for the rest of my life. And I knew that I shouldn't be living with him at 16. And so I ended up calling my aunt, and who I lived with the rest. And that's kind of what started the real healing journey. But finding the love in myself at those times, I can't even tell you what it was, other than there was just something, or enough people just giving me enough light throughout that gave me the confidence and courage to do that. So that's up to that point.
I love
And I think too, that gave me, even at that age, there's a lot of reasons. I don't know if any of the viewers that are watching this know, but as an adult, for most of my adult life, I was in law enforcement. And that was part of the reason I went into law enforcement is I had a couple friends in law enforcement when I was working through high school, and we'd have some interactions. I thought, okay, well, that's good. My dad was in law enforcement, even though it was a weird thing. It was still there. There's that connection. But I twofold. I felt like I could help people. I felt like I could be a voice to people. Um, it paid well from the get-go. And at that point in my life, well, I was already going to college to become a police officer. I got my criminal justice, law and justice degree. But I also was being fed information that my stepdad was planning on killing my mom and that I needed to raise my sister. So I was thinking, okay, how can I get through college? How can I do this and support her? And so it just really fit a lot of the needs that I felt like I had at that time. And so that's how I got into law enforcement and started my first half of the adult career.
Isn't that crazy to think back on it now? Like all of those
Oh
pieces,
my gosh.
and even the decision to go into law enforcement. I mean, that's a major decision.
Right? Yep.
Yeah, major
Yep.
decision. And 24 years
And worked for 24 years.
in law enforcement, doing amazing work, I have to say.
Thank you.
So all of this leading up to be daring and start Desta-Phoenix.
Well, again, I think that there is whatever pull inside of me. And Penny, you and I have talked about it for probably, I don't even know how many years.
A long time.
Okay, yeah. So that I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm being pulled someplace else. I feel like whatever, but I don't know what. And honestly, sometimes you get into a situation where you're kind of trapped. But in law enforcement, one of my favorite things to do was investigations. And I was a major crimes detective and I was a major crimes sergeant. And we dealt with anything relating to people as being a victim, whether it was assault, child abuse, um, homicide, both child and adult, shootings, robbery, anything like that. So one of the reasons why I love that work so much is the connection I could make with some of the victims, and or the victims' families, and then seeing them or having them call me and check in afterwards, just because they felt that connection and they felt safe to do so. That was a huge light. And so again, as well as all the things that I experienced as a childhood that we've touched on today, all the things in that 24 years of law enforcement, and having that connection, it really naturally led into this. I won't say that I did it on my own. I had an injury that kind of I believe in God. And so I say, when you don't listen long enough, he's going to force you to listen. So I think I was forced to listen. So I had to, and I feel grateful and blessed that I was in a way, but I had to retire medically last year. Uh,
Mm.
so, and I think someone used this words serendipity to me and said, "You are just that fits you, Tamera," because with all my calling, with all my talking to Pennie back and forth and other friends back and forth, and people telling me, you have a big voice, you need to use it. You have a big voice. You can do it. You can help a lot of people. Don't limit yourself. And that was being fed into me for years. So fast forward a couple months ago, I saw a class that was called In Your Own Voice. I had no idea what this class was. I don't even know where I saw it. So I thought, oh, I kind of like that name. I like In Your Own Voice. Maybe I'll check it out. If I don't like it, I don't like it. If I do, I do.
Yeah.
And through that, the person leading it was a person named Karen Ross. No clue who Karen Ross was. Like, whatever, she's someone.
Yeah.
And so through my serendipitous, like, kind of behavior, I really found this amazing woman that was able to just like, okay, guide me through. It's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, yes. I mean, through that class, it was like an aha moment. And it's like, yes, this is what I want to do. This is what I've been being prepared for all my life. And like you, I'm not saying this should never happen to anyone. You should be able to be prepared with, like, I hope you work your way out of a nonprofit organization and I work my way out of a coaching advocacy. That's what I really want.
Exactly.
But I really do feel like those experiences, sorry about that.
Okay.
Those experiences prepared me for this moment. And I have a lot to share with other people. And, we've just scratched the surface here. And really, it doesn't even matter because I wrote in a post and we've talked about it before. And you might have even said it to me the first time, but pain is pain, trauma is trauma. It is what it is. Everybody
Yeah.
experiences different types. And you might think, and we've talked about this before, as far as the sexual abuse trauma, I'm like, it's nowhere near yours, it's nowhere near yours. And you're like, that's okay. It's pain is pain. Like it still shapes your future.
Absolutely.
And I feel like that with trauma too, there's like, trauma is trauma and it's your story. Everybody has a story. It's your story and it doesn't matter about anybody else's. It's your story. And if you have trauma that you need to overcome, if your voice has been muted for some reason or another, that's what I want to help you find. That's what I want to help you do because there is a free, joyful life out there.
I love that, Tamara. And I agree. And we talked about it a lot. Hard is hard. Everybody's got different hards. I guarantee there's not one person in our town, one family in our town who life is perfect because it just
Right.
doesn't go that way. It's just not how it is.
No.
So wow, I'm just so proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank
And so thankful for not that you had to endure what you've endured, but that you are where you are right now. Because I do agree, this is the time. This is the time. So let's talk just last few minutes. Let's talk about Desta-Phoenix and where is Tamera Pihl headed? What is it? What is your dreams and hopes for Desta-Phoenix and for whatever your next steps are?
So I've got to be honest. I do have a passion for law enforcement and I have a passion for, anybody that has experienced the trauma and just doesn't want to be stuck anymore. I just, to get from that unstuck point and beyond. That's really what my passion is. So when I first thought of Desta-Phoenix, I have to be honest, I thought about law enforcement and law enforcement families because even though I'm retired, I still have a husband in law enforcement and I still have two daughters that um, I'll back up. I feel like every officer who's been on for any length of time has some form of post-traumatic stress.
Yeah.
You just can't do the job and not have it. I mean, it is what it is, and it might affect people in different ways, but I honestly believe every officer has post-traumatic stress. But beyond that, the family has that too. The family has a lot of things that they have to go through and endure in their life. And so I'm a mom of 2 kids that have that too. So that was really where my voice started to go. And then I'm like, no, but I don't want to stop there. I I have a lot. I have a lot to give, and I really enjoyed not having to investigate the crimes I had to investigate, but I really enjoyed being that little bit of light and hope and courage and strength for the people that did go through that in law enforcement. And honestly, I was reached out recently by someone with a 12-year-old that's just said, she's been going to counseling for 2 years. I'm not a counselor, I'm an advocate, I'm a coach. But if I can talk to someone and help them through this, absolutely. I mean, if they're not connecting with a counselor or connecting enough or just haven't found the strength to totally release their stuff to their counselor yet, and I can be that bridge, absolutely. I mean, honestly, it's really just about people overcoming and finding joy.
Yeah, thank you for that, Tamara. And I think you have it's a brilliant point. And I actually had someone who works for a school district in Seattle who talked about ACEs the other day, adverse childhood experiences, but their connection and their work and the experiences that they've had with that. And I think our experiences bring way more than a counselor can ever bring, unless the counselor has those experiences. I've had so many survivors say the counselor doesn't get it. Like they tell us textbook stuff, but experiences they don't have. So I think that's a unique way to approach and help find joy for folks. So thanks for that. Awesome. So Tamera, we will share where we can find you. I know that you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn. I don't know if you're on Instagram or Twitter.
Not yet, but Desta-Phoenix on Facebook and LinkedIn, like Pennie mentioned, and also Desta-Phoenix, the number 4u at gmail.com. And it's DESTAPHOENIX, Desta-Phoenix.
Excellent. Well, Tamera, thank you so much for being vulnerable here and sharing with us. And I'm so excited for people to connect with Tamera because she's doing amazing work. And there is so many of us that need to come together to really normalize conversations around trauma. We all have it, and we want to just help everyone turn that trauma into joy. So thank you, Tamera, so much. Sending you lots of love.
Love you.
Love you too.